Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started on the webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us today for our monthly series of Conexxus webinars. Today's webinar is on security information and event management, what we also commonly call SIEM logging. Our presenter today is Mr. Matt Bradley with EchoSat. Next slide. So today's agenda, I'll talk through a couple of housekeeping things, give you a little bit more information about Matt, our presenter, provide some information about Conexxus. Matt will actually give the presentation, and we'll have Q&A at the end, questions and answers. And also, I would encourage folks, as questions come to your mind, please feel free to ask us questions throughout the webinar. In the GoToWebinar panel, there is a question section, and that is where we'll be answering the questions. So if you have a question, just please type your question, and then we'll be happy to answer your questions throughout the webinar, and especially at the end as well. Next slide, please. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available in approximately 30 days. You can view it on YouTube. Conexxus has a website link, and there's a short survey upon the conclusion of this webinar. It's very short, it's only just a couple questions, and that is how you can obtain the actual slide deck, by answering the survey questions, and then it will be you'll be receiving a link to obtain the slide deck. And like I said, please ask questions via the GoToWebinar, the panel interface, and then we do ask that you try and refrain from vendor-specific questions. If you do have any concerns, please email info@conexxus.org. Today, our Conexxus host is Miss Allie Russell. We're very happy that Allie keeps us going here today, so thank you, Allie. I'm your moderator. My name is Kara Gunderson. I'm the chair of the Data Security Committee at Conexxus. My day job is I'm the point-of-sale manager at Sitka Petroleum. And we're very happy to have Matt Bradley as our speaker today. He's a solutions engineer with EchoSat. And Matt has been working as a network engineer for 17 years. And in his current role as solutions engineer, Matt currently designs customer network solutions for EchoSat, as he'd done previously also for Heartland Payment Systems. So in his prior years, Matt utilizes technical and customer skills to interface with TNS customers in pre- and post-sale roles. In addition, during the tenure of his career at MCI and Verizon, Matt worked as a senior network engineer supporting Verizon's core and DSL networks. As you will hear, Matt brings a wealth of networking experience to the EchoSat customers that he supports. The solutions that Matt prepares and implements helps his customers secure their networks. So Matt, thanks again for joining us today.
Cara, thank you for the introduction. Appreciate it.
You betcha. And just a little bit about Conexxus before Matt gets started here is that Conexxus is an independent, nonprofit, member-driven technology organization. So for instance, today Matt is a volunteer within Conexxus, as are many others like myself. And Conexxus sets standards for data exchange, security, mobile commerce. We also provide the vision to help identify emerging technical trends, and really are a huge advocate within the industry. And technology is the policy. As you probably say that Conexxus is kind of like the technology arm for folks like Next. So, next slide, please. We do have some upcoming webinars. As I mentioned, Matt is going to give us the SIEM presentation today. In April, we have the Internet of Things and the impact of bringing your own device to the workplace, and that'll be presented by Bradford Lowy of Wayne Fielding Systems and Jeff Gibson, also of EchoSat. In May, we'll have the Customer Engagement Technologies to Enhance Sales and Profitability, led by El Calapi from W. Capra, Gray Taylor, who's the Executive Director of Conexxus, and Leslie Sasha, who's at Impact 21. Next slide, please. Conexxus is holding their annual conference in Annapolis, Maryland, April 23rd through the 27th. If you are a Conexxus member and you're interested in attending, please do so and register before April 23rd, as that is the next deadline to save some money on registration fees. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. So now we'll turn this over to Matt to talk about SIEM logging. Matt, take it away.
Great, thanks, Cara. Just a quick question. I'm detecting a little bit of delay between when I change the slide and when you actually see it. So if I get moving too fast, please let me know. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for taking the time out of your day for this presentation. I'm here to talk about SIEM, or security information and event monitoring, and logging and alerting. So I'd like to start with this slide. Many of you may recognize this from the movie The Matrix. In the movie, in the scene, we see a bunch of humans sitting around a monitor watching this data stream down this screen, and from the context of the scene, we can tell that these viewers are looking at this data and they're able to visualize what's happening within the matrix. And I remember being blown away by this concept, thinking, how could anybody possibly glean what is happening within the matrix just from these data streams? There's so many characters, there's so much information, there's so much going on. How could they possibly make any sense out of it? And after years of experience, I realized they couldn't. It's impossible. There's just way too much information being put in their view, and there's really no way that they could possibly make any sense out of it. And a network solution is very much like that. There's just too much information. So what is the SIEM? Well, SIEM is a combination of two different technologies: security information management and security event management. The two of them combined give you a solution that A, collects logging data from the network, and then B, analyzes that data to determine if there's any actionable events that deserve attention. It's a critical component of awareness. If you imagine, if you weren't monitoring your log or log data, you'd really have no visibility into what's happening within your network, both real-time and historically. So SIEM provides you some visibility into the network in a real-time sense. It also gives you some access to historical information. Should an event arise and we need to go back and backtrack, how did this happen, which players were involved, which systems were affected, the SIEM is going to give you some visibility into that historical information. And additionally, it's going to provide you some tools for reporting to help you meet some compliance requirements you may have. The SIEM can be software-based, an application running on your server somewhere, hardware-based, a complete solution provided by a vendor, or it could be offered as a managed service. So who needs a SIEM? Well, effectively, any organization with information to protect. It's hard to imagine any business actually operating that has no information that they need to protect. Especially in our space, we know we're holding some very sensitive data, the petroleum business line, and we've got information that we do need to protect. So a SIEM really would apply to us on this call. Any organization required to meet some compliance requirements. We, in the petro space, we're all responsible for PCI compliance, so this would apply to us as well. But it could apply to anybody with other compliance requirements, something like SOX or HIPAA. So what does the SIEM do? A, it begins with the aggregation of event data. We're going to configure our devices, our systems, all those devices that we're responsible for, our area of responsibility, to send log data to the SIEM. The SIEM will collect this log data from all these various sources. And it's going to perform some event correlation. You know, a single event on its own may not warrant any actionable activity. But if we see event A plus event B plus event C, those combined together might indicate the problem and justify some action. So the SIEM will perform the event correlation. Based on those events that we see, we can configure some alerting. Maybe we want to generate a ticket for the security team or send an email to management. The SIEM is going to perform that alerting function for us. And then lastly, the reporting. It's going to be able to generate some reports that we need to help us meet our compliance requirements. So what does the SIEM do? It does not provide 100% protection. The SIEM is not a security solution in itself. It is merely the mechanism to help us understand what our security network elements are telling us. So it will not protect the network in itself, but it will help you protect yourself by giving you visibility into what's going on within your network. It will not make you compliant. Having a SIEM in itself is not necessarily a compliance requirement, and having one will not help you be compliant, but it will give you the tools that you need to get to that compliance. Some of the benefits of a SIEM, really it starts with the real-time monitoring, giving us some visibility into what's happening so that we can take action as soon as necessary, as soon as possible. Some of the side benefits, it's going to give us some performance statistics. How is my network or my servers, how are they functioning? We can tell the status of the application. We can tell if maybe I've got a critical web server that I need my customers to be able to get to. I can get some trending analysis. How long has it been down? Is it down daily? Maybe there's a particular hour of the day where the volume gets really intense, really high, and maybe I'm overtaxing that server. So the SIEM and the information that it's collecting from that server is going to be able to tell us, you know, maybe we need to add some resources here. Maybe we need to add another server, add some more CPU, some power. Additionally, there's some cost savings, potential cost savings from a SIEM solution. We all deal with multiple vendors, and maybe every vendor has its own logging solution and its own portal into that logging, which is great, but this means we have to look at multiple different tools to get all of the information about all the activity in the network. So the intention with the SIEM is, well, let's eliminate those third-party applications, funnel everything into our SIEM, give us a single place to look, and maybe that means we don't have to purchase a license for that monitoring application provided by that vendor. So there might be some cost savings involved here. Again, it's going to help us meet our regulatory requirements. Speaking to centralization, again, if we can aggregate everything into a single solution, it's going to reduce complexity. Rather than having to train your staff to understand 7 different applications to monitoring the network, maybe they only need to look at this one solution. So it's going to reduce the complexity in managing the network ongoing. And then there should be an immediate return on investment in this solution as well. If we had to staff employees to monitor 7, 10, a dozen different applications, that means more people monitoring different applications. Even then, there might be so much data coming from a particular application that one person isn't enough to actively monitor it. So the intention is, let's funnel this all into one application, reduce, which should effectively reduce the number of employees we need to actually monitor the network. That frees up our IT to focus on more important tasks at hand. So what are the features that we're looking for in a SIEM? Hey, it starts with the log collection. There are different versions available depending on what the client software can support. There's an agent-based or an agentless. Agent-based is going to require you to install some sort of additional software on the client, the system at the store, sending the data to the SIEM server, whereas agentless can kind of leverage the pre-built existing features of that client. Depending on the number of devices or different applications or vendors you have in the picture, you're probably going to need both an agent and agentless-based SIEM solution. Again, all these logs are collected in a centralized location. Interoperability is something to consider. How do all of these devices, the point of sale, tank monitor, etc., how do they interface with the SIEM solution that I'm going with? And then also, you might have some additional tools that you want to pull out of the SIEM solution. So does the SIEM have an API available which will allow you to extract some data that you wish to pull from it? Log retention is a question. How long do I have to keep this data? How much information do I have to collect, and how long do I have to keep it? Really, that's going to come down to your compliance requirements, something you need to understand when you're looking at a SIEM solution. The key factor here, though, is you want this information to be easy to extract and easy to analyze, which leads us to, do I need to encrypt the information? And this is just my personal opinion. I don't think there is the definitive answer whether you have to encrypt or not encrypt. It really comes down to where are you storing the information and how secure are you making it. If it's very difficult to access, maybe encryption is not necessary. If you think it's a little more vulnerable to access, maybe encryption does become necessary. The key point is, whatever you do, make sure that it's easy to get to the data, because you will need to get to it, and you will need to get to it quickly. Some other things to consider are the resources available for processing the data. This really comes down to events per second. If you can imagine, you have 10,000 network elements sending data, depending on how often they're sending a log event. That could be quite a bit of messages hitting the system. In this graphic here, one of our collectors is hitting almost 500,000 messages an hour. You need to make sure that A, that the server receiving the data can process that, and B, that there's enough network in place to support all of this extra information. So what else are we looking for?
In a convenience store space, what kind of logging devices would we be looking for? You'd mentioned tank monitoring. Are there just some other types? And of course, everybody's store is going to be slightly different. But what types of things should they be tracking? You'd mentioned tank monitoring.
Yeah,
video surveillance, perhaps.
I'll touch on this a little bit later on, but really it comes down to what do you feel that there's a need for? In my opinion, I want logging data from every device that I'm responsible for. So that might be the point of sale, the register, the tank monitor, a back office PC if I'm responsible for that, car wash, anything that can send log data, I would prefer to see it. Maybe you don't have the resources to capture all of that, so you might have to scale some of it back, but at a minimum, anything in the cardholder data environment, I would think you should be collecting from.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So some of the other things we're looking for is event correlation. Many of the SIEMs that are available on the market have predefined rule sets, which makes it very easy to get up and running quickly. But you're going to want to look for a solution that offers you customizable rule sets. Things change. You're going to need to tweak. It can be all dependent on your particular network environment. So customization is desirable, if not mandatory. And then again, make sure that that correlation is easy and intuitive. In the interface to the SIEM, how hard is it for me to create a rule set that meets my needs? We're going to look for the ability to log user activity. I want to know when Joe logs into a system, and what other systems he's logging into and what permissions he has when he logs into these. I want to be able to track my users, internal, external, anybody. I want that audit trail. And then again, many of the SIEMs come with some pre-defined reporting tools, PCI, HIPAA, SOX, etc. But I'm going to look for a solution that gives me the option to customize those reports as I see fit. File integrity monitoring, that's another important feature. You're going to want your mission critical file servers housing our sensitive data. You're going to want to have those configured to send the log data to the SIEM to record moves, adds, changes, etc. Who did it, what did they do, when did they do it. All of that needs to be logged. And then those logs need to be searchable. The search function should be intuitive and easy to use. When an event happens, you're going to need to backtrack all of the activity to get to a root cause, and the easier that search function is to use, the easier it is to get to that root cause. And then the dashboards, how is this information presented to the user? Is it easy to understand or is it complicated? I love this little graphic. It really is not a business we work with at all, but I came across this article a couple of years ago about this company in Colorado, started up, and they understood the importance of the effective presentation of information to the end user. So they actually went out and hired the graphics designer who worked on the last Tron movie to come up with their dashboard, and this is what he came up with. I just think it's a beautiful example. But it's important that the dashboard is easily understandable to expedite your end users in diving into the information to get to whatever they're looking for. An event might happen, there are thousands of events hitting the system per minute, per second, depending on on how much load the system's under. They need to be able to filter out, weed out, get to the information that they're looking for quickly, and a usable, effective dashboard is critical to that. It's also desirable if the dashboard can export information into another format. Maybe it's easier to search or to retain those searches in another format. This is just an example of a security report on our solution, the PaySafe solution. The security appliance detects a threat, classifies it, whether it's a high-risk threat or low-risk threat. Certain threats, based on the known nature, are blocked automatically. Nearly all of them are. Occasionally, some are allowed through as a low-risk threat, but they notify us that this event has happened, and all of these events are logged for forensic purposes. All right, this is a Gartner's Magic Quadrant for some SIEM providers, just to give you an idea of who's out there and in the play. There are quite a few options available, but I'll stress before selecting any of these, it's important that you understand what your needs are. So we know we need a SIEM. How do we go about acquiring SIEM? Well, it all begins with preparation. And we need to understand that there might be some competing interests on what's important in the SIEM solution. Your IT team is really going to be focused on the here and now. Give me a tool, gives me some great visibility into what's happening right now. Give me log data, flow data, activity, security events, what's happening in the network now. Whereas those of you more responsible for the compliance side, you're looking more long-term. I want reports, data on the last month, the last week, the last year, Give me information on who connected, who was in the network, what did they do, where did they go, and then be able to report that for my compliance requirements. So what are some criteria in selecting a SIEM? Well, first is to meet the business needs. You got to understand what those business needs are and define them, and then determine, does this meet our needs? We're going to look for a scalable solution. As your network grows, as you add components, you're going to make sure that the SIEM you've selected can scale with your network easily. Again, we want reporting functionalities. Can this solution meet our requirements for reporting? How easy is it to manage? Is it customizable? And does it integrate well? So what are those needs? We need to define those needs. In a small organization, there may be 1, 2, or 3 of you making the decision as far as what SIEM you need to go. In a larger organization, it needs more input. You might have to form a committee to clearly define those needs, but it is important that you do that. It's also important to understand the systems that are going to be interfacing with the SIEM. Does my, what is my POS capable of doing? What is my back office capable of doing? What is my tank monitor capable of doing? Understand what those systems can do. And then you're going to want to define your workflows. What activity do we take when we see an event that happens? Who's responsible? Who needs to be notified? We're going to formalize those requirements, and we might go so far as to issue an RFP. We're going to select some finalists, maybe execute a proof of concept, evaluate the solution at hand. Of course, cost comparison comes into play. We need to understand, does the solution meet our budgetary requirements? But in addition to just the SIEM solution, take into consideration the cost for acquisition, implementation, and maintenance. What's it going to take for me to go out and configure all of the different components that are going to be feeding data into the SIEM? Is it a truck roll? Can I do it remotely? All of that needs to be taken into consideration. Then we're going to select our SIEM, and we're going to deploy. So now we're ready to implement. And I think we spoke a little bit to this question earlier. What information do we collect? So there's 2 different modes of trains of thought. The NSA mode, clearly defined requirements. With the NSA mode, we're going to configure every system to send every possible bit of information that it can to the network. That's great if you have the resources to manage that, to store all of that information. If not, maybe we need to define exactly what we do need to receive from the systems. We need to understand which operation we're going to, which mode we're going to operate under. Understand your event spikes. You might see a particular activity at a particular site during a particular day. Understand those event spikes. If we can expect that that's going to happen, then we won't consider it an anomaly. Understand that. Classify the exceptions. I'll speak a little bit to the timestamps. If you've ever spent any time doing forensics work, it's very difficult to backtrack an event if the log data that you're getting is in different timestamps. Trying to calculate those on the fly can really slow you down. So it would be recommended that you maybe operate all of your equipment on a single time zone so that data is all logged at a common time. Makes it easier to analyze. So what are the devices or sources we're getting all this information from? In this petroleum environment, at a minimum, any device in the CDE should be logging data that's capable of logging the data. We might have the back office PC, the tank monitor, any routers, switches, or firewalls at the store. We want all the information from the store that we can get. On certain systems, we might want all of the log data on that host. Windows-based machines are capable of sending you application security and log system data, log data. So take that in consideration. Active Directory, if you employ it, that would be absolutely desirable in a SIEM solution. We want to see who's logged in and when they're logged in, and know everything about who's connecting to our systems. And I would imagine that all of you support some sort of a VPN as well. You're going to want to log your VPN connections.
So Matt, we've been talking about stores a lot, which is, I think, where the focus is here, but could that also pertain to the corporate office, where the back office files are going?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
And I guess I'll throw in an example there. So because we just got notified that one of our marketers had their corporate office hacked, and they had to pay ransomware to get their corporate data files back.
Right. No, I guess to meet compliance requirements, you should be logging all of this activity for anything within the cardholder data environment. Your corporate network might be isolated from that environment entirely, but yeah, there is absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be collecting the log data from the non-corporate environment as well. I would highly recommend that as well. If somebody might access your corporate environment and do some damage that's not necessarily accessing the CDE, but yeah, I would like to have the ability to see the event activity in my corporate environment so that I can backtrack. How did they get in? What do we need to do to correct this? All right, and then we will wrap up with operations. So now we have our SIEM up and operational, but it's important to understand that this is not a set it and forget it solution. The environments are constantly changing, the threats are evolving. We're going to need to modify the way we manage this SIEM in an ongoing and evolving manner. Understand that corporate policies may change, therefore we need to modify the way we operate SIEM. Maybe we didn't alert on a particular function in the past, but now that our policies have changed, we need to alert on that now. So we're going to have to modify our policies to shift with the corporate policies. And then, of course, there's regulatory changes. PCI changes might require that we change the way we operate our SIEM. The key point here that I want everyone to understand that there is always a human element involved in this solution. PCI has some very specific language about reviewing logs daily. That in the end, you have to have a human interfacing with the SIEM, making the decisions. Is this actionable? Is this not actionable? Is this permitted? Is this a false positive? A human will be involved in this. And understand that ultimately a human is responsible. We can't just say we have a SIEM, it was doing its job, and therefore we're not responsible. We own it in the end. That's all I had for today. Does anybody have any questions?
Matt, thanks for that great information. And the questions are just starting to come through. So again, please type in your questions in the panel section of the GoToWebinar. And the first question is, would SIEM delivered as a service to merchants where log data is moved to the service provider system's cloud increase the PCI scope for the merchant? So again, with the SIEM delivered as a service to merchants, where the log data is moved to the service provider system or cloud, increase the scope for the merchant.
Okay. I would say that the log data being sent from the system to the provider should not contain cardholder data, and therefore should not increase the scope.
Okay, great. And do you think it's a good idea for a SIEM service provider to have a ROC, like a report of compliance, whereas they could provide an attestation of compliance for PCI? I mean, as a merchant, I can see requiring something like that depending on the data that you're sending. To your point, though, shouldn't be sending payment card data.
Agreed. I would say no harm in being compliant, but they should not be receiving card data to begin with.
But if there's a chance that they could impact cardholder data at some point or some way, somehow, then I would think the answer to that would be yes. So I think it just depends on the services provided. It's probably best to have an assessment anyway, just to have that assurance for your customers.
Agreed.
So those are the only two questions that have come in. We'll give folks just another few minutes to ask the questions here. And again, folks, at the end of today's webinar, there are just a couple of short survey questions, and please do go ahead and answer those. I think one of them is asking for suggestions for future Conexxus webinars, and so we want to make sure that we're meeting your needs, and so please do feel free to provide some additional suggestions on that. We had another question that came in. Since the log data and the protection of the log data is included in the PCI DSS, wouldn't the scope be extended to the SIEM provider's environment?
Well, again, I don't believe that you're sending should be configured to not allow that or not send that data.
Either the qualified security assessor or the internal security assessor, depending on whether they're level 1, 2, 3, 4, and what is required of them, and then get that assessment.
Yes, that's an excellent suggestion.
Yeah, I have my QSA on high alert at all times, asking lots of questions. So another question here is two-factor authentication required to view or to review the SIEM data?
I keep coming back with the same answer through all of them. If the SIEM is not containing or holding cardholder data, MFA is not required per PCI. So I would say no if it's configured in the manner that I'm suggesting.
Correct. But again, I would consult with your PCI auditor, and perhaps even your data security assessor. So, any other questions? If we could go to the next slide, I think we're done with the questions. So I want to thank everybody for coming today. And the website for Conexxus is www.conexxus.org. You can email us at info@conexxus.org. The next webinar we will be announcing, we're not quite sure of the date yet, but it's going to be probably the week of April 17th, we think, at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern. And again, it's going to be the Internet of Things and the impact of bringing your own device to the workplace. We did have one other question that came through. Do CHD filters have to be run on data exported to a SIEM service to assure there's no cardholder data in it? So again, does cardholder data filters have to be run on the data exported to the SIEM service to assure there's no cardholder data in it? I think you'd want to scan for cardholder data, make sure that there isn't any running through there or could have accidentally got in there.
Yeah, if that feature is available, depending on your network environment, then yeah, I would recommend it. But it really comes down to the configuration of the client. How is it configured to send the data? And that's entirely vendor specific. I couldn't comment on all of the different possibilities.
Yep. So I think all these PCI related questions would probably be best and referred to a PCI security assessor. Okay. Well, thanks again, everybody, and please complete the survey at the end to get a copy of the presentation here. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.